You know, I would say that Andrew Scott's portrayal is much, much, much more sociopathic, perhaps. I'm Nick. I'm a director and editor, and today I'm going to be talking about the show Ripley. But first, I want to give you a little background on the, let's call it, modern history of artistic television. In the early 2000s, during the time of The Sopranos, Deadwood, and The Wire, there was this promise that television was going to become the salvation of the narrative visual medium. These shows were dubbed prestige TV, and they were lauded as a form of high art akin to the highest of highbrow art cinema. It was a new age brought forth by HBO, a subscription service that allowed for the funds possible to make truly artistic work that would be enjoyed by an audience that was subscribing and paying to see something original and unique. So more recently, we've come in contact with streaming service. It's changed the media landscape of television. Pioneered by Netflix, they perfected this streaming module, and there seemed to be a renewed hope with them that the promise of cinematic prestige television with shows like House of Cards and Orange is the New Black would be renewed again. But as time wore on and the number of streamers increased, mediocrity became the norm. The streaming landscape began looking like every other television landscape. Flipping through channel after channel of mindless cookie-cutter entertainment was simply replaced by flipping through a streaming database of the same mindless cookie-cutter entertainment. There has been, in me at least, a death of hope for anything original or interesting, and it is expected that anything that comes out of a streamer will be mildly entertaining at best and offensively bad at worst. All they care about is making something that's just good enough to keep us from canceling their service and getting a different one. So there's something that's happened to our media products, and it's something that I'll explore in more detail in another video perhaps, but to give you a short version of it, I would like to call it commerce censorship. There's no actual censor. There's no guidelines handed down by a state entity forcing a product to be made a certain way to appease, say, a totalitarian government, if you will. But just as a state entity would pass an edict, the media market and the need for the capital to make these extremely expensive media products assures that only certain types of products are ever created. The artists actually censor themselves and cater their creations to that which they believe will appease the market, that which will garner them the funds to make their work in the first place. The artist censors themselves, limiting their creativity, controlling their ideas in ways that maybe they don't even understand. To put it in a historical perspective that is sort of related to the show Ripley, in the Renaissance you had patrons who dictated the work of these artists. So in that time, we had these rich individuals dictating what is made. And now we have algorithms as our patrons. People like to think that there's some board of directors very similar to this kind of elite class in the past, but I don't think that's what it is anymore. I think it's worse than that. I think it's probably not really anyone's decision anymore. It's just a market force, a computer-generated idea of what will be predicted to make money. And worst of all, these predictors are probably pretty good at understanding what's going to make money. And so there's no real reason to stop using them. And why am I talking about all this? It's just that these are facts of how media is created. And it's also why I'm so shocked by the originality and the artistic quality of the show Ripley. So much so that I wonder to myself how a show this good even got past the gatekeepers of media production. I mean, it seems like they're so hell-bent on constraining narrative visual media to such a bland standard that it seems almost like a conspiracy to make mediocre work. And yet, Ripley is a miracle of artistic creation. Just as amazing as it would be to see a great artistic work pass through the strict censorship of a totalitarian regime, a great work of art passing through our algorithmically enforced market censorship is truly a thing of beauty. And it's a testament to the ingenuity of those creating art. Something that I may have forgotten, but I hope you don't, is that those in media production, the creative types, they want to create beautiful, original work. And they're talented, and they're able to do it. So for me, Ripley is a delivery on the forgotten promise of prestige TV. I'll give you a quick rundown on what the show is about. I've been criticized for not explaining the details of the plot before. Ripley is this kind of criminal guy. He's good at forgery and stuff like that, but he's also kind of a loser. He lives in a terrible apartment and doesn't really have direction in his life. And for some inexplicable reason, there's a very rich man who calls him because he believes he knows his son, Richard Greenleaf, or Dickie Greenleaf. But the interesting thing is that it's never really clear if Ripley actually knows Dickie Greenleaf or if it's just a kind of odd coincidence or a misunderstanding. But Tom Ripley takes advantage of this. He takes up the offer of the father to go to Europe to try to convince Dickie Greenleaf to come back to America for his father. When he gets to Europe, he realizes how great it is there, and he sees in Dickie Greenleaf something of a friend, also a kind of a new mark since he's a con man. And he decides he's going to try to string out this situation as long as possible so he can stay in Europe and mooch off people. And of course, dangerous things continue to happen after that, such as murder, lots of theft, identity theft, and the like. So one of the things that I love about this new interpretation of Ripley is that he's not good at being a con man anymore. I think in the movie, The Talented Mr. Ripley, it's kind of implied that the talented Mr. Ripley is good at forgery, is good at impersonating people, is good at coming up with plans to get out of trouble. But in this, a lot of emphasis is placed on the kind of unplanned nature of the things that he's doing. I would say that Ripley, interesting how we have taken talented out of the title, right? Ripley is very reactive. He's doing things almost out of survival instincts. So there's a lot more criminality in his character. It's a lot more about just like, okay, what do I do to get out of this next step? And in turn, that creates a lot more urgency in this show. It adds a level of tension that is so interesting and so needed because of the fact that this is a remake. And for people who have seen the movie, who know the story, who know what's going to happen, we need that element of, oh, whoa, this guy is screwing up. And there's that nervousness to it of like, he has to fix all of these problems. He has to clean up that blood. He has to figure out a way to get rid of this body. Brings me to the second point of what's so great about it is that so much emphasis of this show is based on the processes. It's very realistic in that we see the processes that would need to happen if you were to kill someone, if you wanted to forge a document, if you were to try to pull off some of these schemes. It wouldn't be easy. We don't skip over those things, and that's a testament to the directing and also the editing, but I'll get into that later. I mean, the most obvious thing, the thing that sticks out to everybody when they see it, is that the cinematography is insanely gorgeous. This is a show that begs to be watched on a giant, as big a screen as possible. I mean, the bigger your TV, you could go see this in a movie theater and it would be stunning. It would be absolutely stunning. Every frame is meticulously put together. There were so many unique framings and interesting angles that you don't see in a lot of television. I mean, this is something that takes time to consider and that the artists involved with really put a lot of energy and effort into. The fact that it's in black and white is so interesting and such a bold choice. You don't see that very much these days. In fact, there's this thing that I like to make fun of called the Netflix standard that has everything looking exactly the same. I talked about it in my last video on 3-body problem, and this doesn't have that at all. Interesting, unique angles that you don't expect. Black and white footage with stark contrasts and interesting dark spots. I mean, I think there are a lot of people that could break down the cinematography in this for a long time. For me, I like to focus a little bit on the editing more, and that is also wonderful. The pacing is slow and methodical, but never boring. In fact, this work reminds me so much of a movie like A Man Escaped. And I think because of the fact that Ripley is set in Europe, that kind of reference is such an interesting one to draw from. You can tell that the people creating this really love and understand cinema with a capital C. If you were to watch something like Robert Bresson's A Man Escape and compare it to Ripley, there's so much tonal similarity in it. It's able to use editing and interesting photographic angles to keep you engaged in a task that is extremely mundane and is able to press upon you the urgency of these these tasks, but also the complexity and the patience required to carry them out. I mean, going back between cinematography and editing, as an editor, I often think of cinematography in shot selection rather than composition, because that's just how my brain works. So, for example, a really interesting scene is he's cleaning up blood and he places the dirty rag on the tub, and the shot is extended there and holds there as the blood that he left there streaks down, and then we hold on it, and we hold on that for a reason, because that foreshadows something. Details like this show that you are in the hands of a master. You're in the hands of master cinematographers, you're in the hands of master editors, and of course you're in the hand of a master director, and probably a master screenwriter who wrote that little detail in. And not to leave anyone out, the acting in this show is brilliant. It's very, very different from the original movie. The fact that Andrew Scott was able to create such a different take from Matt Damon, who had this very good interpretation of who the talented Mr. Ripley was, he's able to take it and make it completely different, but maintain the same kind of thematic ideas of who this character was. You know, I would say that Andrew Scott's portrayal is much, much, much more sociopathic, perhaps. We're able to see him as more of a monster. There's less of the love element between him and Dickie, although it's there, but because he's such a antisocial person, he's able to portray to us that even he doesn't understand the feelings. His feelings of love and being rejected end up getting quickly turned into this desire to inflict pain and rob and steal and revert to his kind of criminal ways. But Andrew Scott's such a good actor, and the show is so well written that there is this weird element where you're like, oh, this guy is really strange, and he does love him, but he doesn't really know what that is. I mean, it's much of a more complex, I think, understanding of a person. There's a scene where Ripley brings a mafia person to Dickie and wants Dickie and him to kind of do a job for this mafia guy. He seems genuinely upset when Dickie doesn't understand why he would want to do this. And the reason is that for Tom, what he thinks is fun is committing crimes. And he is falsely thinking he has this connection with this guy, Dickie. And so in his mind, he thinks, yeah, he's gonna want to do this with me because we're friends. He'll understand that it's fun to commit crimes. It's exciting, it's an adventure. And when he doesn't, he has this interesting realization that his facade needs to be put back up. Shifting over to the writing of this show is also very, very smart. And what I like to think of as smart writing is something that allows the audience to infer meaning and respects its audience. It believes in the audience's ability to find the meaning that the writer has intended to put into it. I'll give you an example. Dickie gives money to a woman, and Tom tells him that he's being scammed. And Dickie says back to Tom, oh, but it's nice to help a beautiful woman, right? And Tom says, oh yeah, sure, I like girls. Such a strange line, very unnatural. The actor delivers it perfectly. And through this odd interaction and the reaction of Dickie to it, we immediately understand, oh, Tom's gay. We don't need to get told anything before. We don't need to see Tom, lovingly looking at a man, although he does do it sort of a little bit later, but it's all subtle. And with these subtle things, the writing is allowing the audience to understand what's happening. I really appreciate when a show affords me that respect, and I think a lot of other people do too. So those are just some of the things that I think are so good about Ripley. Let me know what you think is so great about it, what you like about it, what you don't like about it if you don't like it. My perspective on what makes something a good piece of work is when I can tell that the moments and the things that have been put into it have been thought about and considered and planned by the creators and then executed in the way that they have planned it. Now, what the heck does that mean? I don't really know, but that's just kind of my way of evaluating what is good. If you have a different idea about that, let me know in the comments. And it's something that I want to talk about later on this channel, hopefully with other people. So let me know what you think about what is good in art.